All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Again, you are here with Baltimore City Historical Society and our first Baltimore History Evening of the year. We are definitely in for a treat. My name is David Armenti. I am a board member of the Baltimore City Historical Society. Happy to be here with you this evening. And before we get started, I just want to give a big thanks to our sponsors at Trace Architects, University of Baltimore, as well as Inheritance Baltimore and the Billie Holiday Liberation Project for sponsoring this series. And I also want to let you know, and I'll say it again at the end, that we are all volunteer operation, and any donations or membership that you might be willing to give will help us keep these events free and continue to have our services available for the community. So thank you so much for that consideration, and I'll drop that link in the chat in just a moment. But it is my pleasure to pass off to my fellow board member, Angela Rogers-Kukui, who is going to introduce our speaker for the evening.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first 2024 Baltimore History Evening. I have the pleasure of sitting next to our first speaker, and that is Mr. Charles Funn. I'm going to give a small reflection on his bio, but we're going to talk about his childhood during this conversation. Charles Funn, a graduate of Morgan State College, is a noted professional musician and a retired band instructor of over 44 years with the Baltimore City public school system. He played behind Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, Sammy Davis Jr., Gladys Knight, The Temptations, and a whole host of entertainment. He currently is performing with Dr. Phil Butt's Big Band, Bowie State University Community Jazz Ensemble, the New World Outreach Jazz Orchestra, the Clarence Knight Orchestra, and the Charles Funn Big Band. His career awards include mayoral citation, the Jazz Journalists Association Jazz Hero Award in 2015, the Benny Glosson, is that his name? Golson Jazz Master Award for 2018, presented by Howard University, and the Baltimore Jazz Alliance in 2022. Mr. Funn trained and developed countless future musicians, hundreds of musicians, including my sister. And he has nurtured and guided a musical development of jazz in Baltimore. So welcome, please, Mr. Charles Funn. So to begin, before we talk about the history of Baltimore and the jazz, could you tell us a little bit about your background, like where are you from and where did you grow up?
Born and raised in Prince Frederick, which is in southern Maryland and Calvert County, right on the Chesapeake Bay. And it was a country town so small it only had two high schools. At that time, it had a black high school and a white high school. My father was principal of the black high school, and my mother was the cafeteria manager at the same school. That was like back in the day when the cafeteria people made the biscuits and actually cooked the food. They came in like 6 o'clock in the morning and started fixing the food. And in a country town like that, you have one of two alternatives. The two mainstays of an area like that is the school and the church. And all of your activities revolved around the school or the church. And I was involved in both, but I got interested in playing music. I had two older brothers, and the oldest one had a cornet. And when he graduated from high school, he passed it down to the middle brother, Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always sit and listen to the practice, but they would never let me touch it. They would never let me play it. And I was, the younger brother, I was like straining at the bit. Let me blow it. Let me blow it. They said, no, no, no. So finally, Malcolm graduated from high school and I got the horn in my hands.
Wow.
And I had problems playing it because I wanted to play, but I didn't want to practice. So, but I toughened it out all through elementary school. And I remember that I would have to walk over to my father's high school, which was across the road, to take horn lessons from the band director over there.
So your upbringing, and your father being a principal of a school, was that inspirational for your eagerness to become a teacher in the school system? And also music, you learned that in school as well. Is these both influential backgrounds to inspire you to do what you're doing now, or?
Well, I got a lot of my work ethic from my parents, but the one thing that I did was I spent 1 year at my father's school, and because of the harassment from the teachers and the kids and everybody, I elected to transfer to the white high school, which was during the time of integration, which is like jumping from the frying pan and
To the fire.
to the fire, But when I got into high school, my band director moved me off of cornet to a larger instrument. And that's basically where I took off as far as that love I had for music. And it was also because of my oldest brother, Langston, who had all of jazz albums, and he brought them home from college. So I was able to hear Constantly with Miles Davis, Maynard Ferguson, Harry Belafonte, Chris Connor. So I got really a good jazz education when I was in like junior high school, which is what they call middle school now.
So your influence of jazz started from your older brother Langston?
Yes.
And
I would play the records continuously. I go down in the basement, and my parents had that thing that had the TV set and the radio and the record player, and you could stack like 20 albums up, and I would just lay on the couch and just listen to jazz. I would occasionally try to play along with it, with the cornet, but
so around what years was this happening? Was it your brother? Were your parents listening to jazz, or was
yes, my father loved Nat King Cole's piano playing. My mother loved Nat King Cole's voice. My father had every record that Dakota State made. And I was brought up in a musical household, and it's amazing. My father played piano, but we didn't have a piano in the house. So that may have been a blessing. I don't know, because usually if parents have a piano, it's like, look, I'm paying for piano lessons. You're not going outside and playing basketball or stealing hubcaps. You're going to sit there and practice 2 hours, and then
yes,
you can go out. But I would basically practice on my own until I started playing wrong notes, and then I pack it up and I'd start playing records and dream.
So as you find your way here to Baltimore from Morgan State, when you were attending Morgan State, please talk about your journey as a musician and educator here in Baltimore.
Being in Morgan or after?
I segue from Morgan,
Well,
like.
okay. After I graduated from Morgan, no, while I was in Morgan, what I used to do on Sundays is I would go down to a club on the block and play at a club on the block. It was called Club Trog, TROC. And they had an organist, a drummer, and a saxophone. And at that time I was playing valve trombone, and I would play my valve trombone, and I would sit in on Sunday nights, because this was during the summertime, because I was going to summer school at Morgan, and I just wanted any opportunity to play, because while I was in Morgan, I organized a jazz group. and we would play in the dining hall on certain nights, and the director of the dining hall would put punch out cookies and all that. And we would do things in the dorms, the girls' dorms, and a lot of the fraternities who had smokers or who had programs at places like there was a restaurant on the Alameda in the Alameda Shopping Center. I remember going there with my jazz group several times playing.
The Alameda Shopping Center. Yeah.
Yeah.
White Coffee. It was, I remember. It's like a
Yeah.
hamburger joint.
Yes, but it was also kind of like a mini cabaret hall,
Yeah.
kind of like a small Martin's West. We were the house band there because we were pretty good and we just enjoyed playing and we were cheap.
So while you were in Morgan and you were doing these gigs on the side, was your plan to go into education?
My father asked me what I wanted to do for a profession, and I knew with my father being a high school principal that I didn't have a choice. I was going to go to college. I realized that when I was in grade school, and I told him that I wanted to be a professional musician. I just wanted to go out and play like Clark Terry and all those guys. And he said, "Well, why don't you get a music education degree? In that way you'll have something to fall back on that will constantly bring the money in between gigs." That was some of the best advice that my father ever gave me, because I was able to teach during the day and play in the evenings and play on the weekends. And there were several instances when I was playing behind name acts. All I had to do was ask my principal if I could take time off to go to the rehearsal, because the rehearsals were usually like 12 o'clock and the show was at night. And the majority of the principals they felt glad that they had somebody on their staff who was playing behind Aretha Franklin or Gladys or the tops.
Yeah.
And then a lot of instances, I wouldn't say anything to them. And I'd be on stage playing and I'd see the teachers had my principal and the administration in the audience. And then
Yeah.
the next day, "I didn't know that you played behind the Temptation." I said, "Oh yeah, I've been on the road with them for 1,000 years." I was putting yeast in it.
So we talked earlier. Can you walk through some of the schools that you were teaching in your early years?
Whoa, okay. I started out at Guilford Elementary and Poly. Poly didn't have music in the curriculum during the day, so I was there in the mornings and the evenings, and I was at Guilford Elementary during the day. That lasted for 2 years. Then they placed me at Mount Washington Elementary and Poly. I did that for a year. I built a program at Mount Washington, so they gave me Mount Washington and Cross Country Elementary and Poly. And I did that for about 3 more years. Then they moved me on the other side of town. Like I had Road Park Elementary where I taught Sean Stinnett. And I was at Martin Luther King Elementary. I was at several other elementary schools, but I was always going back to Poly in the mornings and in the evenings. And at one time, I would have 3 elementary schools during the week and Poly in the mornings and the evenings.
So you were creating these music programs at these schools. They weren't there when you were.
No, they had the instruments there, but they basically weren't playing.
Okay. And then when did you begin working at Dunbar?
Sometime in the 80s, I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, as we segue into Dunbar, that was the location of the creation of the Urban Service Agency Cultural Arts Programs.
Norman Ross.
Yes. You had started working with Norman Ross, and it was a jazz band, I believe, a cultural arts jazz band.
Well, I wasn't working with Norman Ross when he was at Dunbar. That was before I got there. But I was at Dunbar because John Lampkin had a big band there, and they were bringing in Dizzy Gillespie, Jimmy Heath, Curtis Fuller, and the big band, the John Lack. I think Urban Services Big Band. That's what it was called. I was in
Gotcha.
Services Big Band, and we would back up all of these people for concerts at Dunbar. And I knew Norman Ross from doing church gigs because he was a heck of an organist and a pianist. Because we did Duke Ellington's Sacred concert, and he was in charge of. That was through John Lampkin as well.
Now, was the your connection to Dunbar because of Norman Ross, or because he was working at Dunbar when he was then in the late 80s, right?
Right, but I wasn't there
Okay.
yet. I got to Dunbar because I didn't want to be at the school that I was at because I could see some things in the works that I couldn't go along with and maintain my integrity. And the principal at Dunbar at the time wanted to have a band there because the history teacher, Danny Brown, was in charge of the band, but he had about 8 kids, and they would play in the stands during football games, pep rallies. So through him, he introduced me to the principal, and through another person, Sandra Donaldson was the English teacher there. So she talked to Charlotte Wayne about me. Danny talked to her about me, and I was brought on board from teaching drama at my previous school.
So, if we can just step away from your life and Baltimore jazz, do you have any knowledge? I know you said you performed in Penn Station area where our local jazz thrives. We have many memories related to famous musicians. Um, you've worked with a lot of musicians. You have any stories about our Billie Holiday or UB Blake, and who we sit beside? Who we sit behind?
Chick Webb.
Chick Webb.
Yeah.
Yes, we're sitting behind Chick Webb. So, do you have any stories about our locals?
I'm old, but I'm not that old. No. I was blessed to become a member of Tracy McClary's Royal Theater Band. That doesn't mean that I was playing with him when the Royal Theater was. He was rehearsing in a church, and somehow I was playing with somebody who told me you should go play with Tracy McClary, and that's where I met a lot of the musicians that played behind the stars. I met Charlie Harris, the bass player, who is Natalie Cole's godfather, because Charlie Harris played bass with Nat King Cole for years. Billy Mackel, the left-handed guitar player who played for years with Lionel Hampton, and a bunch of other Baltimore musicians that played at the Royal Theater. They told me a lot of stories about the experiences that they went through, but I can't repeat them now. I was also fortunate enough to be in Baltimore's big band that was led by Gene Walker. And it was funny, I came in as a third trombone player, and I worked my way up by hook or crook to playing first. That was after like 35 to 40 years of playing with Gene. And there were myriads of other musicians that mentored me: Jackie Blake, Whit Williams, Major Boyd. I remember when I first got to Morgan, Major Boyd, the tenor player, heard me playing my horn in the hallway, and he pulled me into a practice room and taught me Stanley Turrentine's song "Sugar" that had just come out, and he taught that to me. Then he said, "I'll be back to pick you up at 7 o'clock." I said, "Okay." And I had no idea what was going on. He carried me. He carried me down to the Birdcage on North Avenue when they had their jam session night. There I ran into Harold Adams and the real players of Baltimore. So I got an early introduction as far as the jam sessions are concerned, and being a part of the Baltimore nightlife while I was teaching school during the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I talked about a few of the legendary artists you played with throughout the years. Can you share some experiences touring with Aretha Franklin and some outbreaks? And have they some of those? I know, like when they come local, they call for you, right? They
Yes, well, what happens is each group goes from city to city. They carry their own rhythm section, but they hire the horns section from in town. And I was fortunate to be acquainted with Clarence Knight, who was a contractor for Aretha, is a contractor for Gladys, the Temptations, the Four Tops. He had that in Side Track. And because I played bass for his band when he was in a pickle because his bass player had gotten sick, and I told him, well, I can play bass. So I played bass, and for another concert they had, he needed a bass player, but he needed a trombone player. So I took Chris. He needed a trumpet player also. So I took Chris to play bass. I carried Kyle to play trumpet, and I was playing trombone.
So tell the audience, who is Chris and Kyle?
Kyle Funn is my oldest son who plays trumpet. And Chris is my younger son who plays bass.
Yeah, Chris is pretty popular in the DC area as well.
Yes. He never stays home. Never stays home.
Well, this is some great information. You've dedicated 40 years to the Baltimore City school system.
44 plus.
44 plus, over 40 years, I mean. I can tell just from personal experience, I would not be the jazz enthusiast I am without your contributions, because
well, don't blame it on me, Angel.
my family, my parents didn't listen to jazz. They were into R&B. And then when my sister joined your jazz band in the late 80s, early 90s.
I remember your parents were always in the audience.
Yes, we were there, and you had them playing at juke joints as teenagers. Can I say that?
Yes.
So
Haven.
yes, so
Harris Bar on Frederick Avenue. Yes.
So those experiences help. I'm assuming thousands upon thousands of students get exposed to jazz, and I don't think we would have that type of connection to the music without you. So I greatly appreciate you for doing that. But what were some memorable, rewarding aspects of your career as a band teacher, and the importance of passing that tradition down? Because a lot of the students that have come past you are now teaching music in Baltimore City school system.
Richard Milburn with Carver, Danny Williams at Patterson, Jonathan Barnes, who I taught at Poly. He was writing music for Cool and the Gang and Earth, Wind and Fire. But memorable things of touring behind Aretha. I remember one time I was playing behind the Four Tops at Painter's Mill, and nobody told me that the stage revolved. And they didn't turn the stage on to revolve during the rehearsal. I just thought it was a regular stage. So during the performance, my music stand was on the inner part of the stage, and I was standing on the outer part. And I had my eyes closed because the particular song that we were playing, it was like one of those songs that just had whole notes. So I had memorized that, and I'm just up there playing, and I opened up my eyes and I see the guys who were in the band with me all the way over on the other side of the stage, and the Four Tops are looking at me singing. So I said, well, instead of running around that outer ring, I'll just wait until the stage comes and back around, and I stepped back on, which got pretty much of a loud reaction from the audience.
That is so. Just to segue back into our Baltimore history, because um we have a great culture of music and people don't know about it. I mean, we always are mentioning Billie Holiday, who was one of the legends. And I heard you mention a lot of people that we really don't know about. I do know you said you've collaborated with a lot of local jazz musicians. Could you give some names of some local jazz musicians that people often don't talk about but should?
Yes, Gene Walker. Gene Walker had Baltimore's big band here for over 50 years, and they would do concerts in the parks. They would do concerts in the high schools. I thought that I had really arrived when I had a gig with a piano player named Mel Spears, who was like a Baltimore legend. Charlie Covington, who thank God is still with us and is still playing. Phenomenal vibes player who was just as good as Milton Jackson or Bobby Hutcherson, Jimmy Wells. He would call me at like 8 o'clock at night and stay on the phone until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And we'd just be talking about music or telling lies or solving the problems of the world. But there were myriad of musicians I was fortunate enough to work with, and they took me underneath of their wing.
That's great. Do you know of any local jazz musicians from the new generation that we should be looking out for?
Clarence Ward. A lot of them are in schools teaching, but there's a whole slew of them. Joey Alexander. I didn't teach him, but he's a phenomenal cat. But there's a lot of people that are playing now that I'm not familiar with, because it's funny. Most of the jazz stars that I listen to are emulated are now dead. You know what? Mel Spears, Jimmy Wells. I'm trying to think of some of the others.
Now, why are you thinking about that? So we're talking about, was there a time while you were in Baltimore and you were doing these gigs where jazz was just a thing here? Because I'm a part of the art and culture community, I see it, but a lot of our community don't see it, like when cultural arts was available.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about how life was when the access to these types of gigs was ready available for musicians? And we're talking about 80s, 90s, even back to were there any things happening in the 70s in jazz in Baltimore?
Yes, Gene Walker had his big band playing. There were occasional gigs with combos and what would be called holes in the wall. Like
were there a lot of people showing up?
Yes, the Sprinks Club on Pennsylvania Avenue. I used to play there with Chico Johnson, Mickey Fields, myriads of guys whose names I can't think of. I was in Lewis Hamlin's big band.
Wow.
And Lewis Hamlin was the band leader for James Brown at one time, and he decided to come off of the road and teach school. He got tired of being on the road, and he had a novel idea of getting professional musicians in each section and then getting high school kids or younger kids to sit in the section so that they could learn also. And he was writing a lot of the songs, and he geared it toward a professional sound.
Wow.
But at the same time, bringing the younger musicians into the fold. And it was great because it exposed these kids to playing jazz. And by me being at Poly at the time, I was able to grab some good kids from Poly and some good kids from Western.
Yeah.
And we were playing places like Melba's place on Green Mount Avenue. We were in there once a week. We were playing for fraternities. We were playing for sororities. And that's where I learned that there was a thirst for it. And he had the novelty of having high school kids sitting up in a big band playing A-Train, Satin Doll,
Wow.
April in Paris. And of course, when the solos came up, he pointed to the professional music, the quote unquote professional musicians. But what I would do is I would urge some other people to stand up and play. I said, well, play this, and just play it over and over again and change octaves and then go up a half step or go down a half step. Because after you get over that fear factor, that's when that orchestra opens
Just
up
comes
and it's
out.
like, whoa, it's a rush.
So
It's
a couple of things with that, because I know that that's what you did with your students. You had them in these places of adulthood, like the
Yes.
juke joints,
Yes.
that help hone this craft. And it's amazing because I've been seeing this since I was a teenager. And you have a big band. And who do your big band consist of?
A lot of the students that I taught at Dunbar.
And we're talking about a span of like, what, 20, 30 years of students, 40s of students that are coming back and joining you for this big band.
There's an interesting story behind that. I was in the band room working with a high school, I was marching band or concert band, and a couple of the students who had graduated came in and they said, Mr. Funn. I said, what? Of course I was glad to see him. I said, can you put the band back together? I said, what band? He said, the Dunbar Jazz Band. I said, the band is together. That no, not the high school band, but the people who have graduated, Clarence and Janae and Sheree and all of them, and Jan. I said, for what? And they said, well, we've been playing in these other bands, but it's just the music is too easy. It's like one or two chords and it's not interesting. And I was doing things like, if we played A-Train, it was the same A-Train the Duke played. It wasn't an A-Train that was written, that was arranged by somebody who dummied it down for high school. We were actually playing Duke's own arrangements. But it wasn't a quick transition. I started on the easy tunes, and I would move up and it got to a point where I would try to find things that they couldn't play. And that led me into Thad Jones. And after some work, they were hitting it. And at one time, I couldn't find anything that they couldn't play. And they prided themselves on that. But the secret I used was put a group together and play the music that people aren't hearing anymore. People in Paris by Count Basie, Intermission Riff by Stan Kenton, Jumping at the Woodside by Count Basie and Woody Herman. And we must have hit every senior citizen's home in the Baltimore area. And they loved us because this was the music that they grew up on. They grew up on it. They got married to it. They made love to it. They hunted. They got divorced to it.
Yes.
And I tried to make it as authentic as possible. And I created a thing called the History of Jazz concert, which toured every elementary school, every junior high school, and middle school. And it was funny because one of the people in the band said that they had to look in their closet with a flashlight because we were all Black.
Oh my goodness.
And we were out of the building like every other day.
Yeah.
And Black History Month, we never stayed in the building. We never stayed in, but we created this History of Jazz concert that traced the history of jazz from blues and spirituals on up to Duke Ellington and bebop, Dizzy Gillespie and John Coltrane. That was the first concert. Then we ate lunch, and then when they came back for the second concert, that was just playing the tunes that we had in our book.
Wow.
So one of the teachers at Dunbar made a crack and said, "Man, at Dunbar band, it plays more than Count Basie's band plays." I said, "Yeah, yeah."
So it says a lot for you to have this band and them ask, can they come back? Like they're coming back
Yes,
to you
yes, yes.
in adulthood as now teachers and instructors themselves,
Yes.
still touring. And I know you said you retired a couple of years ago, but you've been pretty busy the last couple of years.
I've been just as busy. I haven't been getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out what color tie I'm gonna wear, but my evenings and my days are pretty busy because I'm pulling tunes out of a book to bring down here to UB Blake, because we rehearse here every
Yes.
Wednesday.
And so I didn't even tell anybody that we're here in the legendary UB Blake Center, where Mr. Funn does rehearsals on Wednesdays, and he does open it up to the community to come down and hear it. And it's amazing. It's free. Just come in, listen to some jazz. What time is it?
It's supposed to start at 7 o'clock, but being as how it's Baltimore, we usually start like around about 7:30ish, and I go until 9:30ish. If we are preparing for a concert, if they want, they are more than welcome to come down and bring their horn.
Oh, did you hear that? You can bring your horn. I'm gonna bring mine.
No, please don't, no. We do have some.
You do have to have some type of talent.
We do have some limits to our integrity, and no, I'm just kidding.
So, just to wrap things up, I do want to mention we've collaborated. There were some highlights of our collaborations. That was recently. I mean, the Dunbar, the Charles Funn Big Band has been playing the Nutcracker, the Duke Ellington's Nutcracker for years.
7
and
8, yeah.
Yes, 7 or 8 years. And for the last 2 years, we've hosted events where the Big Funn Band was actually playing the Nutcracker to the actual dancers of Baltimore Dance Tech.
There's a story.
Yes.
Behind that. You would come to hear us play it at R&D.
Yes.
And every time I'd see you in the audience, after it was over with, I said, "Angie, you know what we really ought to do? Move these chairs back. You find some dancers and have them come in and dance to the Nutcracker. You can have the dancers rehearse on their own by just rehearsing to the recording.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm rehearsing at school." And it was like this year.
Yeah.
Because there were other years where they came in, they danced to one song, they danced to 2 songs.
Yeah, so it started with, I remember you saying, "Angela, I envision dancers."
Yeah.
I'm like, I envision dancers too. So just this past December, we did the Nutcracker Suite Ballet at Reginald F. Lewis.
It was great.
It was great for the students, and they were young children, to dance to live music at the Reginald F. Lewis behind your band was amazing.
It was ridiculous. I mean, the skill of the dancers, it was rough trying to play the music and enjoy the dancers as well, because there was several instances of where we played one song twice.
Yes.
Because there was an intermission, and I think we played on the intermission, and they came back and asked us to play again because the dancers were, I said, "Sure." But they did a ridiculous job. I mean, so it was heart-rending. Yeah.
It was very good. And you've been performing at Keystone Corner. You performed the whole Nutcracker Suite again at the Keystone Corners. But you've been playing at a lot of venues with your big band and other places. So you've been pretty busy to be retired.
And I'm loving it. I spent 44 years to get to this job that I love.
Wow. So I have one more question for you.
Okay.
As a legendary jazz musician, how do you envision?
You're talking about me?
Yes, you are in the books, Mr. Funn.
Legend in my own mind.
How do you envision the future of jazz in Baltimore, and what efforts do you believe should be made to preserve and promote jazz culture in the city for future generations?
UB Blake needs to continue what they're doing, step it up more.
Mhm.
Todd Barkin at Keystone Corner needs to continue what he's doing and step it up a little bit. The thing is, there's a whole generation of people out there that only hear jazz if it's in the movies.
Mhm.
And the schools have a responsibility of educating these kids. If they don't have a jazz band there, they can bring a jazz band in. They can bring jazz musicians in. I'm available. I'm not doing anything all day. I can find a drummer. I can find a piano player. We can come in and work with the elementary schools. We can come in and work with the middle school, the high school, because you can't appreciate it unless you have been exposed to it.
Yes, and I am a witness to that. I am one of your observers of that, and it was embedded in me as a child. And I listened to it, and a lot of my colleagues like, "What are you listening to?" I'm like, "You don't listen to jazz." And it's not a thing where you are teaching jazz; you are teaching the culture of jazz.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, because you get a better appreciation.
You have to
when
be
know.
exposed to it, because I have had kids and adults say, I don't like jazz. And I've told them, I said, do you know there are as many different kinds of jazz as there are different foods? I would get sick and tired of eating filet mignon if I had it for 2 weeks. And I always get them enraptured to jazz by playing Quincy Jones's version of Killer Joe.
Oh, wow.
And they say, oh, I can see if they hear jazz, they automatically think John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, Miles Davis in his later years.
Right.
And I said, no, you have to develop a knowledge of it. You have to learn how to crawl, then you get up and walk, then you start running. And if you aren't exposed to it in that same way, it's a turnoff. But it's not being played as much on the radios as it should be. And there isn't a market for. I mean, you have Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, but what kids in Baltimore have access to that?
Yes, yes.
And it's amazing how social media, I love it because you can go on social media and hear Freddie Hubbard being interviewed.
Wow.
You can go on social media and get aspects of soloing, how to play jazz, how to approach a chord, what to practice, what a pattern is. You don't have to be in a school. You can go on YouTube. I was enraptured by a thing I got on Barry Harris. And he opened up my head. I mean, he opened up my head as if I had been shot with a bullet. It was like a canoe with just one idea he had.
Wow.
I practiced it on my own, and I applied it to all of the other songs. I mean, it's right here on your laptop, but the kids are listening to other forms of music. They're using it for other things, but there's an education right in this thing here. It's there, but the exposure of it, they don't want to sell it because they claim it doesn't sell. And I've heard jazz is dead. I've heard it since I was a kid.
Wow.
You know, jazz is dead. Nobody listens to jazz anymore. And I put the kids on the bus and would go to a high school. I've got a guy that's playing in the band now who said that he's playing because we came to his middle school and played a song that turned his head around.
And he's an adult now.
And he's my lead alto player.
Wow.
He plays baritone, he plays tenor, he plays soprano, and you look Brandon Moultrie. I never forget, he told me that. He said, man, y'all came to my school and played a tune called Monk. I said, really? Because it's funny, that was a pattern I tried to get the people in the band to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would do, if they wouldn't practice it, I put it in a song. And that's where that song came from. Just that no teeth, but play through 4 or 5 keys and a bridge and go back to it. I had him practicing.
And now he's one of your front.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I'm blessed.
Yes,
I'm blessed.
absolutely.
blessed.
We are blessed to have you influencing Baltimore City's community with jazz.
The job isn't done yet.
It's still, no, it's not.
Job isn't done.
So I see we have some questions. Hi, Allison. Allison is
Uh-oh.
doing great work over at Johns Hopkins, and she had a question. She said that do you have a collection of records or photos that you like to donate to a repository, and UB Blake would be a good home?
Allison, how are you? I am way ahead of you. When Gene Walker retired, he turned the band over to me, and that's like 5 complete boxes of music plus some other music I have that I have to get out of my house. And I'm in the process now of bringing all of those songs down here and all of those arrangements down here, not to be put on display, but for them to be used in the event that somebody has a big band and wants to look over some tunes. They can get the Sammy Nestico book, they can get the Ellington book, they can get the Basie book. I've got some pictures that of my tenure at Dunbar. I got to get them out of my house, so I'll bring them down here.
That would be great.
Thank you.
And just if anybody knows or don't know, Mr. Funn actually has a repository over at the Peabody. He has an oral history over at Peabody. It's online and accessible to everyone. He's also a part of the Robert Brett Chapman collection at University of Baltimore. When he's part of Cultural Arts, we have a lot of photos of him performing at UB Blake on 409 Charles Street. Yeah, but we have videos of you from when he had a big afro. So we have you are in some repositories, but it would be great if you could donate some work.
Definitely, I can get that stuff out of my house. Yes. Tomorrow's promised to no one.
Yeah. Mike, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, I've been very impressed by the public school connection. And I was thinking, as you're talking, I mean, like even the great Ellis Marsalis in New Orleans taught high school for his whole career, in addition to founding that dynasty. And could you just sort of elaborate maybe a little bit on not only the history, but sort of the current situation, the need for support for music programs in the public schools?
Music will always need a support for the public schools, because unfortunately, the problem is it takes a lot of money to run a band program, because you have to purchase the instruments, then you have to keep them in tip-top shape. You have to get the materials. I had a discussion with one of my administrators who was telling me, do you know how much it costs to support a football team for a high school? And I said, probably 1/10 of the amount for a marching band, a concert band, and a jazz band that's functioning year round. But I got around that by taking the jazz band out to do performances for the cost of transportation. You feed the kids and give a donation to the band fund, all of which is tax deductible. That was working fine until the bus transportation went from 150 up to like 300 and 400. It got ridiculous because of the insurance. But I never relied on getting money from the principal or from some other source that was like kind of a hand-me-down thing. I tried to create a revenue myself. And it got to a point where I had the marching band going out and doing performances. We were doing conventions at hotels down in the harbor. Several times we were doing marching band things at the convention center, because they wanted a marching band to come in and just start everything up and get the people pumped up. I said, a bus, feeders, and a donation. And I was shocked when the charter bus pulled up. I said, oh, we have arrived. We're going on the road, because they just wanted to have a band there. I had the concert band going out doing graduations at schools that didn't have bands. We played elementary school graduations, we played middle school graduations, we played high school graduations, and the kids had a ball because they were able to get out of school. But no, there was a caveat to it. I said, if you don't have a B average in all of your subjects, you're not going anywhere. And I had a permission form where each teacher had to sign, giving that kid permission. And I told them, it's up to you to get the work, get the homework, get the work which you miss, if you want to get on the next bus for us to perform. Because to be perfectly truthful between you and I didn't want to be in the school all day. I enjoyed going out performing at the other schools. I said, you can come along with us, but you got to maintain that B average and have the permission of your parents and the permission of each of your teachers. And if you fall, I can't take you until you bring your average up to that B in everyone's class. And it worked. It worked. But the school system has to do their part. Social media has to do their part. The radio stations have to do their part. I mean, it's like a situation where you have a problem and everybody knows what the problem is, but everybody knows what to do, but they aren't doing it.
So we have another question, David. I see the hand up.
Yeah, well, I have a question myself, but I'll wait if you wanna. We can take the one that's in the chat.
Could you read it for us? There's a lot of.
Sure. Um, uh, Somebody who she says she came in a little bit late, but wondering though, if the jazz scene in Baltimore, musicians, audiences, venues, has been a place where Black and white Baltimoreans came together. Was it in the past? Did it change? Is it now more or less? So basically, how integrated was that kind of cultural environment?
During what time? The 80s or now or the 70s or?
It seems like she was asking about, any time period, I guess, that you were exposed to, and maybe did that change over time?
Oh, when I was in Baltimore's big band, that was a totally integrated band. As a matter of fact, I think that was the first time of me playing where I was playing in an integrated group, because up until that time I was playing in college and it was Morgan. We had a couple of white guys in Morgan's band. But the thing that I like about music, to quote Miles Davis in a Playboy interview I read, he said, I don't care if the explicative deleted. I don't care if he's red and got green breath, as long as he can play. And that's the thing about music. It's not so much about the gender or the color of the skin or the religion or what kind of clothes they're wearing or how they look, as long as you can play. Now, there's different aspects of knowing how to play, but I'm seeing pretty much integrated groups, yes. Yeah. And it's great. It's great.
Do you mind if I jump in, Angela?
Sure, absolutely.
And having, thank you so much, Mr. Funn, and having this conversation this evening, hearing this conversation reminded me that I had a very, very brief jazz career in my time at Poly, which may have been, a legacy from your time there as well. But the only reason they grabbed me, I was the closest person that knew how to read piano music when the more talented actual piano player was having some other issues. So I was there for about 3 or 4 months. But my question is actually about something you kind of mentioned in passing very early on, which actually takes us back outside of Baltimore. You said you transferred from the black high school in your community, that your father was the principal, to the white high school in the community during that kind of integration era. Could you talk a little bit more about what that experience was like? And did you notice if there was maybe a difference of resources, as you were kind of getting your musical career started at that time?
I saw that at the white high school, they had more instruments. They had more horns. I saw that it was supported more. I was able to move from cornet that I was mediocre on to a baritone horn, which had a larger mouthpiece. And I was finally able to produce some kind of sound and be able to play. And I was part of an ensemble playing marching band and concert band, but I wanted to be in the jazz band. But the problem was there wasn't a place for a baritone horn in a jazz band. So then I found out there was an instrument called a valve trombone. I said, oh. So being as persistent as I was, the bass player in the jazz band was graduating. So I asked the band director, could I take the bass home over the summer and learn how to play? So I taught myself how to play bass over the summer, came back and played bass in the high school jazz band for a year. My father bought me a valve trombone as a present, shocked me. I had a hot, he drove to Lexington Park from Calvert County.
Wow.
6 o'clock in the morning to make sure I had a valve trombone to take to school. So I was able to play valve trombone in the jazz band, but I saw where the resources were a lot greater in the white high school than in my father's school. And I would hear stories or see him going through the frustrations of trying to get support from the Board of Education for his school that would be equal to the white high school. But I guess that was just a sign of the times. And one of the things I think I inherited from my father was being tenacious. He would stay on the phone or stay up in the principal's, the superintendent's face, or call him every day until he got what he wanted. And I'm pretty much that same way.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
And can we take this one last question, and then we can wrap? So we have one of our participants was surprised not to hear about the Left Bank Jazz Society. Any knowledge or insight about the Left Bank Jazz Society?
Had a teacher at Morgan. His name was Dr. John Albert Sweeney. He was a jazz enthusiast. He was one of the greatest organ players in Baltimore, but he was also a French hornist, but he taught survey of jazz, and he enamored himself to the jazz musicians at Morgan, of which I was one. And he would come by on Sundays and pick me up from the dorm to go down to the Left Bank Jazz Society. And for the cost of, like, it was $5 or $10, you could go in there and hear jazz all night. They had free chips, free pretzels, free soda, and free ice. So for a guy in the dorm, that was food for me. But I was able to see Thad Jones's band there. I was able to see Freddie Hubbard there, Kenny Burrell, McCoy Tyner, and that just heightened my enthusiasm and enjoyment for jazz, because I would carry that back to the school, and in some way I would push that intensity in concert band, and I would push that same intensity in marching band. I mean, it's all the same notes from one group to another. But yes, I spent a lot of time climbing those steps at the Left Bank Jazz Society. I was in the soul band, which played there. And I have a story about that. I think it's like 35 or it seemed like a 100 steps. We were hauling all of this equipment, organ, the Leslie speaker, the PA columns, the bass amp, the guitar amp, and all of the horns and all the stands up these steps for a concert there one night on a Friday. And the guy asked us, why don't you use the elevator and back? After we had carried all of this stuff, it must have been about close to 40, 45
Oh my goodness.
steps.
Yes. Is it because the was it Undie Music has a lot of steps too? Do they have an elevator?
They can't have an elevator because
Oh.
I asked Henry about it, but unfortunately, it's on the historical side of thing, and you can't put an escalator in, and you can't put an elevator in. And every time we would go down there and play, I say, Henry, can I use the elevator? And he'd just shake his head and walk away.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. I call him Mr. Funn because this is how I started as a teenager calling him. So he doesn't like that too much. But Mr. Funn, thank you so much for this intimate conversation.
That was quick.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's been an hour.
It has?
Yes. Thank you everyone for coming. We do have more to come. Next month, March 21st, we have Betty Bland Thomas from the historic Sharp and Linden Hall. She's coming to speak online on Zoom. April 8th, we have Dr. Kate Drabinski doing queer history and public. Also, May 16th, we have David, I don't want to get his last name messed up. Do you know how to pronounce that, David?
Fakunle, yes.
Yes. I
What?
know him very well, and I can't get his name. But he'll be talking about searching for precious stones and explorations of Baltimore arts and culture and health efforts between 1968 and 1923. And then we're going to end our amazing programming in June, on June 20th, with Dr. Joyce Scott, J. Scott, Introspective, our artist, our legendary artist. Please visit our website at Baltimore History, Baltimore City Historical Society, and our website at BaltimoreCityHistoricalSociety.org. David, if you want to wrap it up.
All right. So really a pleasure to learn and hear the conversation this evening. Just to echo everything that Angela said, and thank you all for your support, and we'll see you next month.